Don't you just hate it when you have wasted material? Look at this. That's a lot of waste right there. What the hell? Hey everybody, what's going on? Hope you guys are doing good. I am doing just great. Back again with the Wilkinson's Telecaster. Finally got the Wilkinson pickups in. I got the M series. These are splittable and they are just as small as a single coil. Kind of my thing going on. Now this kit has 3 pickups inside it, so I couldn't get a 2 pickup, so I had to buy the 3. Not a big deal. These are Wilkinson's. Like I said, the M series. These are kind of nice, and that's what's going into this body. As soon as I get some of the finishing work done, then I'll start doing the routing work. But right now, see, she's really sanded. Doesn't look as pretty as what she used to, but she's also got binding on it. You can kind of see that. Hopefully you can. And the reason why I went with this binding is because it kind of matches the top a little bit, and everything is sanded flush, so there's no lip of any kind as far as the binding goes or the wood goes itself. It's all been sanded around the edges. I got a few low spots from doing the sanding because the top of the body was really not level sanded before I put this on. I didn't want to do any sanding beforehand because I knew I was going to have to do some sanding when I put the binding on. Went through a couple of spots of the clear, which is not that big of a deal because when I put the next coats of epoxy on here, that will never show up and it'll look just like the rest of it does. The back and everything is sanded. Now the one thing that I ended up doing with this, instead of going into where I put the armrest with the binding, I narrowed it down over here, so it's got, can't even feel it. It goes right into that sharp point over here and continues around the edge with no binding until it reaches the other side, and the other side's done the same way. So this is the first time that I've ever put binding on a body. Okay, yeah, I've done a bunch of other shit, put binding on a neck, but I have not put any type of binding around a body. And I gotta tell you, it's fun. I mean, it's not like, you can't rush it. You can't sit there and do it 1, 2, 3 and be done. You kind of have to let it sit overnight and kind of dry a little bit as far as what you use for, say, glue to put the binding on. Now, I found a lot of videos back in the day that I used to watch. People were using acetone for putting binding on, and it's really not a big deal. But the only problem with using acetone is that if you have some type of a clear coat or some type of a finish on your body of guitar, depending on what that finish is, the acetone will soften up that finish. So you got to be really, really careful what you're doing. Now, the nice thing about the epoxy resin is it did soften up, but it bounced back really quick. So when I put the binding on, it was kind of real easy to put the acetone on here and not have an issue where the finish was going to lift, or even the veneer itself trying to lift off the top of this. This is all really nice flat, nice and smooth. Now, I wanted to try something. Now, acetone and lacquer thinner, they do kind of the same thing. All right, they'll eat through plastic, so you got to be careful with that. It's not good to put them on, to use paper with it. You have to dispose of both of them in a certain way. Now, what I end up doing is if I have any type of either acetone or lacquer thinner on a rag, I will soak that rag, wring it out really, really good, rinse it out, and then lay it open on top of a rock outside if I'm doing stuff outside, or I will lean it over the tub that I have down here, the slop sink or whatever they call it down here. I'll lean it over that for it to dry out really good, and then I'll throw it away. I won't wash them and I don't reuse them. So one thing that I found to apply binding with, which came out really, really good, like I said, using acetone. I'm going to move this off to the side. And again, acetone and lacquer thinner tends to eat through plastic, and that's what helps the binding adhere to the material that you're putting it on, either it's wood or whatever you're doing with a body guitar. So I kind of thought, well, maybe if acetone eats through plastic, what is acetone going to do if I put it in a CA glue bottle? Okay, I bought a bunch of these CA glue bottles, and sometimes, the bottle or whatever, the cap mostly, because a lot of times these things here get stuck on there if you don't clean them properly. So I bought a bunch more of them so I can transfer, like if I still have a little bit of CA glue in a bottle, but the bottle is crap, I can pour it into another bottle and it'll be like new again. So I put the CA glue inside of the bottle, put the acetone inside of the CA glue bottle, and so far it's held up. So using, I guess they call this a wick, using one of these, I cut it down a little bit, and the nice thing about it is as thin as acetone is, it doesn't come out of this really quick and make a mess all over everything. So you're able to point this where you want it and apply a little amount and keep it in a certain location that you want it to go in. So in this case here, I wanted to hit around the edges over here, and I wanted to hit around the edges over here as I had this taped. Now I did use some heat to get the sharp bend over here, and then to make this bend over here and here in order to get this to like stay in one spot. And you want to make sure that your tape, you're using good tape, not cheap masking tape. Now I tried using a lot of the blue masking tape with this, and I got nothing but tearing. So I ended up using a little bit of my fine line striping tape, which worked out a lot better because it stretches. I'm able to get that binding real tight up against there. Now you want to make sure that, like if you have sanded edges and stuff like that, that they are nice and clean, dust free and everything in order for that tape to stick. Same thing with the top. It worked out great, and I was able to get a nice tight fit around here. And the nice thing about this binding is it kind of matches the top the way that it looks once the top has a gloss finish to it. Now my only concern and my only problem is what the hell to do with the back now. It's all sanded, all really nice and flat, got rid of all those gripping marks or something that was in the wood. That's all gone, so everything is nice and flat over here. The edges I still have to go over and round them off a little bit, because on a Telecaster I noticed that there isn't really too many sharp edges between the roundness, so I gotta kind of even that out a little bit, and then do a little bit of sanding inside here and a little bit of sanding over here. I can kind of feel it's still a little bit rough. The rest of it is nice and smooth. I stopped at 220 grit sandpaper. That's all I want to do with it. Now I don't want to dye this, so I want to kind of keep it natural, but then again I want it to have a little bit more color to it. Now I know this is going to turn kind of like a yellowish color, and I know this is going to get darker as soon as I put some type of a clear or epoxy resin over this, depending on what I'm going to use as my clear coat. It's going to darken up, and there's some things like this here I couldn't help. There's some shit over here that I couldn't help, and there's a spot over here that I couldn't help that's in the wood. So, and then there's like some dots over here that's in the wood itself, and then this spot over here. I can't do anything about that. That doesn't sand out, and the more I sand it, the more it starts to come through, so it's something in the wood. But again, I want this thing to maybe have a natural look to it. I'm not sure. I mean, what do you guys think? Maybe I should dye it, or because if I dye it, I got to be careful I don't dye the darker area, because that's going to change the color of that too. And like I said, like this side here has got this little part over here, and then this side here has that little part over there to match. So they both have, kind of an equal amount of the wood showing up through here, on depending on how I sanded it. So this has a flat surface over here. It's not as rounded as this. This is where your output jack goes, and it's flat. So they didn't round it off on the template over here the way this side is. So I got a little bit more wider of a piece of wood showing here than I do on this side. But all in all, she don't look all that pretty right now. Not yet anyways. But that's my dilemma. I don't know what I should do as far as a color, if I should even put some type of a color on the back of this thing. And like I said before, I put a angle over here. Here's your little armrest. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do the belly cut or not. I'm really not sure about that, if I want to get into that or not. I looked at the files that I have for working with different stuff, and I have a file that I can use, but I did this with my rotary sander, and what was it, 40 grit or 80 grit sandpaper, and then I did it with 40, then I went to 80, and then I went with 120, and then I went with the 220 to smooth that out and give it the roundness over here and have a nice straight line over here, which right now it feels a little bit on a wavy side because I didn't sand a lot or all of the epoxy resin that is protecting this top. Now what I'm going to do is do the finishing work to the body. All right, I'm kind of going to go reverse here. Do the finishing work to the body, mask everything off, and then go ahead and start doing my routing. This way I don't have, like, if I end up masking this off over here or masking off where the pickups would be and whatnot, I don't have a lip that I have to sand down and work on. It gets to the point where a lot of bubbles get into that lip, especially up against the masking tape that I use to mask off the surrounding areas, and you get these air bubbles in it, and they're really a pain in the ass to get out when you're doing your sanding. And then you have to kind of sand everything to where it all looks flat, because as the epoxy resin, for some reason, somehow, and I've tried doing this with the squeegees that I got that I use for doing epoxy resins, is pulling away the buildup that builds up against the tape. But it seems like the tape draws the epoxy resin to it, and you get like a little curve going up to the epoxy resin. And yeah, I'm trying to eliminate all of that to where I'm going to make it a little bit easier for me. I didn't cut out anything. I didn't put anything inside of the pockets over here when I put the veneer on the top of this. So this is giving me a fresh, flat surface to work on. So when I go and do the finishing epoxy on here, that's kind of what I'm doing, is I've got a fresh, flat surface to work on and end up cutting out and routing out. This is getting a Telecaster bridge. It's going to be string through. I got ferrules that have to go on the back of this thing, but not on the top because it goes through the bridge. And that's about it. So I'm going to announce the winner of my Christmas giveaway, and that'll be in a next video right after this one. So stay tuned for that. Take it easy, guys. Oh, by the way, have a great weekend.